Denis Villeneuve's Dune is an epic masterpiece, one of the best science fiction films we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. But would it have been better if it was a Netflix series instead? Hey everyone, this is Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and thank you for joining my YouTube channel. And it has been a while since I have updated a actual video editorial on this channel, which will be used for the blog. I actually need to be updating my iCritic blog. So for those of you who are watching, thank you, and hopefully we'll get to do more of these in the near future. But here's today's topic today. I was on Twitter, where, interestingly, I'm off Facebook. I can't stand Facebook. I kind of still tolerate Twitter, though. It's kind of funny how that works out. Where I saw a tweet by Rick in Maryland. Now, for those of you who do not know who Rick in Maryland is, he is a retired Navy man. He blogs on a site that I quite enjoy reading called Bent Corner. And me and him are fake friends, meaning we follow each other and we converse with one another. And sometimes we agree on things, sometimes we don't, but we respect each other's opinion. Now, he tweeted something, and I'm going to read the tweet in question right now, where he wrote, "I finished watching Squid Games last night." Actually, it's Squid Game, but even I make that mistake. "What a fantastic TV series. It demonstrates how superior the TV series format is today compared to movies." A statement I largely agree with, by the way. I do think there are movies that are better than TV series, to be sure, but TV has substantially gotten better over the years. It's for those people who say, "Oh, I missed the golden age of TV when it was in the 50s and 60s." You know, no offense, you probably don't. I mean, look, I love Lucy just as much as anyone else, but do you really want to go back to the Leave It to Beaver model where it's like, "Golly, Mom, I'm so sorry I did this," or do you like the gritty dramas of like Breaking Bad and Dexter, or the reality competitions of The Masked Singer, American Idol, or even like the family dramas of like Seventh Heaven and Everwood? I think TV is substantially better today, and so I mostly agree with the statement. Still, I think movies have an experience that TV doesn't offer sometimes, and so I don't want to get rid of the movie format altogether. But he adds, "The Dune movie would have been so much better if it was a 10-episode TV series." And that's what started a little back and forth Twitter conversation and was also the inspiration for this video. Now, for the record, I am in the middle of Squid Game, and I do agree, it is a fantastic TV series. I can't imagine it ending on a disappointing level. Who knows, maybe the end of the season is bad, but so far, really good. And also really encouraging that a series like this could actually become really popular. That's another great thing about the modern day era of television. Like 20 years ago, you could have made Squid Game exactly the same as it is now, but it never would have gained traction in America. It would have been this thing that never crossed borders, but thanks to sites like Netflix funding these things, it gets put on our streaming platforms where audiences can discover it. So Squid Game is definitely an example of what I like about television these days. That said, I did push back a little bit and said there was nothing wrong with the Dune movie. The Dune movie is fantastic. It's great. Would it really have been that much better in a TV format? And I also kind of use like a little bit of math, like, you know, they're planning a trilogy of Dune movies to my knowledge, and if each movie's 2.5 to 3 hours long, you've got an 8-hour or so movie at the end of the day. That seems like it should be enough to cover a 8 to 10 episode show that Dune would have been on TV. And so I was kind of like, well, what's the big deal? This doesn't seem like this is something to be concerned about. Now, Rick did have some responses, and I'm going to put them on the screen right now. I'm not going to read them all. You can pause and read them if you want. But he made some arguments that are, let's just say, familiar. I have been hearing these arguments since the beginning of time, and some of the arguments include, like, you know, they cut these parts from the book. The book is a masterpiece. Why didn't they adapt it more often? A 10-episode series would have allowed for more detail, kind of like how Game of Thrones was like a wonderful adaptation and arguably would not have been what it is if it had been a movie. And I started to write a response to these tweets when I realized it would probably be more effective if I not only responded to them in video format, but it was a fascinating topic for a video, so I could kill two birds with one stone. So, thank you, Rick. And no, just because I'm making a video responding to Rick does not mean I hate the guy. I like the guy quite a bit. So I just think this is a fascinating topic for video, and I think this channel's been a little empty recently, so that's why I wanted to make it. Now, the first argument I'm going to address is a topic that I've heard for many, many years. This was long before the golden age of TV even really came up, before we started getting our Wires and Entourage shows and 6 Feet Under TV series, long before we had our Weeds, and heck, maybe even before we had that David Lynch TV series, which I can't remember right now, but you know, I'll post a poster of the TV show on ABC. Like, long before we had any of that, this has been an argument that's been going on where an author writes a book, and the book is wildly, wildly loved by millions of people. They love it enough that eventually Hollywood comes, picks up the book, and says, we're going to turn it into a movie. And there's usually a mixture of results. Sometimes people are not aware of what the book is because they haven't read it and they watch the movie and they're just judging the movie based on its own merits. And then you have people who have read the book who can definitely separate the two. Maybe they do like the book a little bit more, but they think the movie's just fine. And then you have the third group of people, and these are probably the most vocal. Those are the people who believe that the author, their word is law. And if you are not as close to the author's words as humanly possible, then that movie is a failure. It does not deserve to exist. In fact, I have a friend named Caleb who actually used to argue that some of these wonderful movies that existed, the 2001 A Space Odysseys, The Secret of NIMH, Jaws, that he would like these movies if they were called something else. Because since they were based off of a book, he now watches the movies, he's comparing them to the authors, it's not the same as what the author wrote, and he feels the author is right, and as a result, he does not like the movies. Like, you know, he would like them if they were called something else, but because they share the title with the book, the author trumps the movie, thus he doesn't like the movie. Now, I don't think this is what Rick is saying, just for the record. He's probably a little bit more reasonable than that. But the thing is, I want to dispel this notion that the author's book is automatically better than the movie just because he wrote it. I have seen several movies that are based off of books, and I've read those books, and I hate to say it, but the movie is better than the book, usually by a wide margin. Aforementioned Secret of NIMH and Jaws, much better than the books they are based off of. Jurassic Park, I mean, Jurassic Park the movie doesn't resemble the book very much, by great author Michael Crichton. I love Michael Crichton, but the movie is better. Or what about Who Framed Roger Rabbit? It's based off a novel by Gary K. Wolfe, Who Censored Roger Rabbit. I like Who Censored Roger Rabbit. I like Gary K. Wolfe. I've actually communicated with that author. The movie's better. I'm sorry, but it is. That's just the way it is. And so for the people who are that extreme about the author's always right, I appreciate it. You know, if you feel that way, and, you know, enjoy your books. If you cannot watch the movies because it is different from what the author wrote, then you know what? That's fine. Enjoy the books. You're perfectly entitled to do it. I believe in many cases the movie is better than the book. But now, an argument that Rick does make, and it is an argument that we must consider, of course, is that the book Dune by Frank Herbert is a masterpiece. It is one of the greatest books of all time. So why would you want to alter, or dare I say, cut from any aspect of the book? The book is perfect, is it not? Why would you cut things? Why would you remove things? Why would you change things around? Why would you do this? Why would you mess with perfection? And this is a much more difficult question to answer, but in my opinion, I think the answer is rather obvious. I believe that answer is, it's because we are watching Denis Villeneuve's Dune, not Frank Herbert's Dune. Frank Herbert's Dune is great. And I actually would argue, yes, it's as perfect as a book can get as far as books come. There are very few other books that I can claim that to. Memoirs of a Geisha is one of them. The Catcher in the Rye, another one. Most of the Harry Potter books, Lord of the Rings, these are about as perfect as books can be. To Kill a Mockingbird, I've read that book like 7 times. And yes, it is difficult to justify, like, well, if it's perfection, why would you change anything? But again, the book is the author's version of that story. The Dune movie that is in theaters and unfortunately also on HBO Max is Denis Villeneuve's Dune. This is his interpretation of Dune, and really, that's what I'm paying to see. Some Dune fans might disagree with that. They're going to the movie, whether it's in theaters or on streaming, and they're like, I want to see Frank Herbert's Dune. I don't want to see an artist's interpretation of Dune. And yet, I disagree. I actually think the different interpretations are interesting. I've actually never really understood this whole thing where you read a book, you love it, and then you go to the theaters and you want to watch that movie and get the exact same experience of what you just read. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, really. In kind of the same way where if you want to even change it up a little bit, when I watch West Side Story, the movie, I am getting a very different experience than what I am getting when I see a Broadway play of West Side Story. Now, does that mean the movie version is better than Broadway? Well, I guess it honestly depends on what kind of experience you're looking for. But I actually like going to the Broadway show and seeing that it's a little different from the movie, and vice versa. And so, you know, as long as the final product is good, I don't care if it's a carbon copy of something that I already experienced. So the Dune novel, it's great. Masterpiece. The movie, it is different, but it is also great. A masterpiece, in my opinion. It visualizes the novel in some ways, in ways that I couldn't think about. Like, I kind of had my own vision of the world in my head when I was reading the book, then I see him visualize it. Some of those things aren't quite the way I pictured it, but they were fascinating nonetheless, and I appreciate that interpretation of the source material. Now, that brings up a bigger question, though. Since things are being cut, would it not be better if it had become a TV series like Game of Thrones and had adapted more of the book and had cut less out? Well, first of all, as someone who has watched all of Game of Thrones and read the books, I actually read Game of Thrones, all 5 books that were available, before I watched the TV series. I can tell you right now, they did make changes to the TV series. There were scenes that were different. Heck, there were some characters in the books that never showed up in the TV show. Some of the characters' fates are different, and that was even before the TV series got ahead of the books. So even if you brought Dune to TV, and by the way, they have brought Dune to TV a few times, I believe, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a more accurate adaptation. It doesn't mean you are going to get the adaptation you want. It's going to be its own version of the story. Now, true, they will probably take more stuff from the book. They might be less likely to cut things from the book because they have more time to fill, but it's not necessarily a guarantee. And even if you could fill that time with more stuff from the book, you are also giving something up that the movie has to offer that sometimes television does not offer, mainly scope. Now, this is where things can get like a little tricky, so follow me. Rick's argument is that he doesn't really care. Well, I sense, he didn't actually say this, but I sense the scope doesn't matter to him in the movie. He watched it on HBO Max in the comfort of his living room. with all due respect to Rick, and I know that his theater options are very different than mine, because we've talked about this actually. I saw Dune on a real IMAX, the Irvine Spectrum IMAX, where it was like very big, very overwhelming. It was so big that, and so vast, the scope. Like, would you be looking over the desert and there'd be like a little speck on the screen and that was a ship? I don't even know how you're supposed to see that ship on TV, but Dune in IMAX was almost an out-of-body experience. And this is not something that you can probably replicate at home. I don't care how big your TV is. Heck, my TV is much bigger than his, and probably bigger than yours because I'm insane and I have a 75-inch TV. But even a 75-inch TV did not capture the IMAX screen. And heck, I ended up seeing a second time on a regular screen, and it was still like I was overwhelmed by the scope of the movie. Denis Villeneuve definitely visualized Dune in a way that I had never seen before, in a way that I think few artists would have been able to visualize. And here's the thing, this would have been lost, most likely, if this was a TV show, because I don't think it would have been financially possible to make this Dune that looks this great and make it for a TV series. I mean, some people say, well, they probably could. I don't know. I mean, we keep running into these stories where Netflix and Hulu are taking second looks at budgets of shows because, you know, they're not showing ads and things like that. So how do you pay for spectacle like this? HBO could do it because you had to sign up for a HBO premium subscription. Netflix is finding it a little bit harder because so many people subscribe to it, but they're not sure if these big projects are necessarily bringing people to the service, or are people subscribing to the service for old stuff that they like, they've already seen. It's kind of a tricky balancing act. As a result, the only way Denis Villeneuve could have captured the scope and just the width of the Dune movie he made would have been in a movie format where you put it in theaters, you charge people to come to see it, and I think we would have lost that. Now, maybe some people don't care that we lose that scope. It's not for me to say, but I definitely love what Denis Villeneuve did with this thing. It is one of the best science fiction films in the last 5 to 7 years. And Rick did point out it's not even Denis Villeneuve's best picture. Well, I don't really care. It is one of the best science fiction movies, which I think counts for something. And by the way, the other two of the best science fiction movies that I've seen in the last 5 to 7 years were Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, and well, we all know who directed those, don't we? Now, again, maybe some people would want to give up that scope for more story. My perception is Denis Villeneuve's Dune is a version of Dune I have not seen. It feels familiar, but it is also fresh. I cherish that experience. And if I really want Frank Herbert's Dune, well, the book is always there. I can always read the book. But then, of course, there's that argument to be made that sometimes including everything from the book, even if logically it sounds like you should, maybe sometimes you shouldn't. I remember when the original Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone came out, and I remember having conversations with friends because, you know, we were fans of the book. And even though there were a few things missing from the movie did take pretty much everything you could possibly get from the book. For the most part, when you watch the movie and you read the book, you're basically getting the exact same product for the most part. And yet, 20 years later, when you watch Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, yes, it is a classic. Yes, it is held up very well, but it is also too long. It's over 2 hours long. It's about 2.5 to be honest. And there's just little scenes in there that you realize, like, they were there because they were in the book, but they don't really add to the world that much. They don't really add to the character development. You can cut a lot of these various little scenes. You could probably get a much more solid, slightly less than 2 hour movie, and I think we would have been much happier with that in the long run. So then, interestingly, the problem with the Harry Potter movies is early on, they were including way too much of the books in them, and then later on, they were cutting way too much out. In fact, the funny thing about the Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, they didn't want to cut anything from the books. They basically didn't cut anything from the books, and yet a lot of people would admit that there was probably no real reason to split them into two. You could have probably trimmed a lot out of Part 1, and you probably could have had like one really solid 3 to 3.5 hour movie as opposed to a 5 to 6 hour movie that meanders for a good chunk of the first half. Also, I'm going to add one more comment, and I think this is a part of the argument that's kind of being overlooked. In regards to Squid Game proving that Dune would have made for a better TV series than a movie, that is a false narrative. Squid Game was written and built as a TV series. It didn't start out as a book. It didn't start out as a movie. It was conceived and developed as a TV series, and so that's why it works so well in that format. It is amazing how sometimes the formats can change perception of things. Dear Evan Hansen was a critical acclaim on Broadway. You bring it to a movie format, it's essentially the same thing, and yet people hated it because the stage experience is very different from the film experience. Another example, let's bring up Roger Rabbit again. Gary K. Wolfe has written 2 sequels to Roger Rabbit, 2 very good sequels, I want to add, in book format. And while the characters are there and the feelings and everything are there, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was so successful because of the visual humor. Well, it's a book, so you can write about those visual gags, but they don't land the same punch. It's just a very, very different experience. So to take something that was adapted from another medium and comparing it to something that was built up for that medium and saying that proves that this would have been better in this format, I think that's false thinking. That's not an amped comparison. Squid Game is brilliant. I love it, but it was made for TV. Dune was made for the book, so there really is no guarantee that the TV version of Dune would have been any better or worse than the movie version. In fact, they still might have cut some of the scenes for TV. Who knows? But anyway, that's just my thoughts. In my opinion, Dune the movie is a masterpiece, and you should definitely see it in theaters on the biggest screen possible, if possible. Screw HBO Max in this regard. Look, a year down the road, if that's all you have, okay, fine. But see it in theaters. That's my recommendation. But here's the other thing. Also, read the book. The book is also a masterpiece. And it's something that you have not lived really if you haven't read it. So I also recommend you do that. Wait, if I listen to Dune on audiobook, would that also change the experience of the book? I'm not going to get into that one. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I don't think there's really a wrong answer here. I just kind of wanted to air my feelings out in person, make another video for this channel, and tell me, do you like this video? Would you like to see more videos like this? Not necessarily responding to people on Twitter, but thinking about some of these questions more openly about how movies are made and what the experiences are like. I would like to know if you'd like to see more videos like this. So, you know the drill. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.